What's going on, everyone? Welcome back into the channel. So tomorrow is the NFL's cut down day, 253 players on your roster. So in this video, I want to make one more final prediction on my Green Bay Packers 53-man roster. On this video, I'll be going over the notable cuts, the back-end players that end up making the roster, as well as selecting my 16 players that I believe will be making the practice squad as well. It has been an awesome preseason so far. I feel like I've learned a lot about this Packers football team, from the starting offense, starting defense, to the backups on both teams, and also special teams. And my roster prediction has changed so much from when I first started it before preseason and now after the final preseason game against the Seahawks. I did just put up my thoughts and reactions on that final preseason game, going over the entire game. So if you do want to watch that, just click the link right above. I'm very interested to see the route the Packers go with their 53-man roster. I feel like I'm going to get pretty close, but I think it's almost impossible to get it 53 for 53 at this point. But I do have a really good idea on how some of these certain position groups are going to turn out and what players could and couldn't make it, so stay tuned. Before we get into today's video, I want to talk to you guys about DraftKings, who I teamed up with in today's video sponsor. Do you guys want to get in on the fantasy action, but you are sick of roster management? This year, best ball on DraftKings is bigger than ever. Just draft your team once in a snake draft at the beginning of the season. Each week, you'll automatically rack up points from your top scorers on your team. No roster management to worry about. So guys, to get in on this action and start playing best ball, go download the DraftKings app and sign up using my custom sign-up code BASARAPROD. That's BASARAPROD. Then enter DraftKings Best Ball $10 million contest and draft your team for the season. Each week, you'll automatically rack up points from all your top scorers. No drops, ads, trades, or I should have played this player. And you'll be able to enjoy all the fantasy football action without having to manage your team. And better yet, the team with the most points at the end of the season will take home the grand prize of $1 million. So what are you guys waiting for? Go download the DraftKings app and sign up using my custom code BASARAPROD. That's BASARAPROD, and play best ball today. Only on DraftKings with code BASARAPROD. All right, so now let's dive into my final Green Bay Packers 53-man roster prediction one day before roster cut. So first off, going over a key here. If the player is highlighted in blue, that means they're a rookie. If they're highlighted in orange, that means they're an undrafted free agent. And if they're highlighted in red, that means they were a street free agent signing this offseason. All right, so to start with the offense and start with the quarterback position, I'm sure 100% of people have their roster looking like this: Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. Last week, Matt LaFleur made it very well known that Sean Clifford will be quarterback too, and there's no need to keep 3 quarterbacks on a roster anymore, as you can have an emergency quarterback. That's your practice squad guy in case both of those guys get hurt in a game. He's allowed to be dressed for that game and go into the game, and that will be Alex Magoo. So there's real no point to keep 3 quarterbacks. There's a lot of other positions that you want to keep guys on the roster, so keeping a 3rd quarterback would waste that opportunity. So obviously Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. Loved what I saw from Jordan Love in this preseason. I'm so excited to see this week 1 game against the Bears with him. And Sean Clifford was also very impressive, and I think he's worthy of that quarterback 2 spot. Going over the running back position, I have Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, and Patrick Taylor. And I know I might get people running to the comments right now. How do you not have Emmanuel Wilson as your running back 3? Now, the Packers could very well just keep 2 running backs here, like they did last year, and bring Patrick Taylor up or even Wilson up at a certain point in the season if they need to. But I do have them keeping 3 here, and that's going to be Patrick Taylor because of what he offers more than just a runner. So Patrick Taylor, I thought, ran pretty well in preseason, but it's what he offers other than that in the pass blocking game, the receiving game, and also more primarily in the special teams game. Patrick Taylor is a main special teamer for this Packers team, and that's how I think they're going to value that running back 3 position, just like they do cornerback 6, wide receiver 7, if they're going to keep 7 or 6. A lot of those back end spots on certain positions are solely for special teams. You know, we're not going to see a lot of Patrick Taylor in an offense in a game unless there's an injury. And at that point, Patrick Taylor could fill in. So I really would love to keep Emmanuel Wilson on this roster, but I simply am going to keep Patrick Taylor because he knows the offense. He's been here a while. He's kind of a veteran at this point. I know the Packers love him, and he offers a lot on special teams. So that means I'm cutting Emmanuel Wilson, McCrary, Tyler Goodson, and Lou Nichols. Goodson and Nichols have been hurt for a while. Who knows if either of them will come back on a practice squad or simply just be, waived with an injury designation. Moving to the tight end position, we have Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Josiah DeGuara, and I have Austin Allen in red there because he's not going to make my initial 53-man roster, but he's going to end up being put on the roster after Luke Tenuta is placed on IR. But Luke Tenuta, I have making the 53-man roster, and then he'll be placed on IR right as the roster is finalized, so the Packers could potentially bring him back later in the season. If they were to put Tenuta on IR right now, he'd be done for the year. And I don't think they want to do that. Although it's a significant injury, I don't think it's significant enough to make him be out the entire year. And I believe they liked what they saw in Luke Tenuta. So I think Austin Allen gets signed, or another tight end gets signed after Tenuta is placed on IR after the official 53-man roster tomorrow. The other three are obvious: Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, DeGuara kind of that fullback role. Those three guys are roster locks. There's not much to go over there. Moving to the wide receiver spot, I have them keeping 7 wide receivers. I flip-flopped around a lot this year from 6 to 7, and also who those 6 and who those 7 are. But I think this is the final what I see happening wide receiver selection for this Packers roster. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Tay Wicks, Samori Toure, Malik Heath, and Grant DuBose. I was questioning keeping Grant DuBose on here, but the fact that he's a 7th round pick and he did impress the times he was in practice and on the field, I feel like the Packers are going to definitely keep him. Brian Gutekunst loves his 7th round picks, and I don't see him getting rid of 2 on the offense that he selected this year. With Lou Nichols not making the roster, I doubt he would remove also Grant DuBose, plus another team might snag him if you're trying to get him on the practice squad. It is easier to have wide receivers slip through and get him on your practice squad, but I think Grant DuBose offers too much potential, and you got to keep 7 here. And obviously you got to keep Malik Heath. What he's done this entire preseason and training camp, all he's done is made plays, and I've already said it multiple times, I'll eat crow on Malik Heath. He has impressed me ever since I made that going over his film from Ole Miss before training camp. I wasn't impressed with him. Came into training camp after kind of impressing in OTA's minicamp and did the same, if not more. He deserves to be on this 53-man roster. I 100% think he makes this roster. We also have Toure, who some people don't have him on theirs, and they think it's between him and Heath. I think they both make it. Obviously, Tay Wicks, Reed, Doubs, and Watson are all locks. Going over the offensive line, we're starting with tackle, so I have them starting the 53-man roster with 6 guys. I know that's a lot, but Bakhtiari, Tom, Nyman, Walker, Jones, and Tenuta, but we see Tenuta there. I have him going on IR right after the roster is finalized, which would then drop you down to 5 tackles, and they'd likely add a tight end or something else of that sort. So the 5 tackles after Tenuta's placed on IR: Bakhtiari, Tom, Nyman, Walker, Jones. I think Jones is a questionable one there. They could very well not keep him on the roster and put him to practice squad, but I liked what I've seen so far in training camp. Obviously, Rasheed Walker's making this roster. They've been putting him at left tackle 1 the past 2 preseason games, and he's looked great. Yosh Nijman could be a potential trade candidate. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea unless a team comes out and offers you like a 2nd or 3rd rounder. I think you need to have like 4 quality tackles on this team, especially with the unknown of Bakhtiari in the future, or if he gets hurt again this year. Zach Tom may have to go inside at some point, so I feel like you need to keep 4 guys there, including Nyman, Walker, but you also have Jones. If you were to trade Nyman, you still technically have 4 guys there, and Tenuta later in the season if he's healthy. Moving on to the guard position, I have Elton Jenkins, John Runyon Jr., and Sean Ryan. I have Royce Newman not making this roster. He hasn't done anything to tell me, hey, I deserve to be on this roster this entire preseason and training camp. He's looked pretty bad in all preseason games, not blocked well, had 2 false starts last game. I think the Packers are comfortable with Jenkins, Runyon, and Ryan. Ryan has been impressive all preseason, in my opinion. Looks like he could be taking that 2nd-year jump after a very disappointing year 1. So I think he's going to be a quality depth guy for this season. Moving on to center, the Packers seem very comfortable just holding 1 center, and that's Josh Myers. We saw in the last preseason game, John Runyon Jr. was the next guy up to take snaps at center. And also we know Elton Jenkins, Zach Tom can play center as well. So I think they're very comfortable just going into the season with 1 center. Jake Hansen was already cut. Cole Schneider, probably a practice squad guy. James Empey probably just ends up being cut. So I think they're okay with going into the season with 1 center. So as of right there, it's 10 linemen. I think it'll be brought right down to 9 right after Tenuta's placed on IR, and they'll keep it that way throughout the start of the season. All right, so now going over the defensive side of the ball for the defensive line, I've pretty much had 5 on all my predictions, and that's how I'm going to keep it. Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, Colby Wooden, and Carl Brooks. Honestly, all those guys are locks. None of those guys are going to end up being cut. It was more so, will they keep John Ford or Chris Slayton as a backup nose tackle type of player? John Ford just hasn't impressed me this offseason enough to to keep a sixth defensive lineman. I think there's some versatility in the edge room, like Lucas Van Ness, who could play on the defensive line, and other players. So I think they're going to be comfortable keeping 5 guys, and they don't need to keep John Ford. John Ford likely able to go right to the practice squad, no problem. Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks have impressed me a lot this offseason, this training camp and preseason, especially Carl Brooks. If you guys are a frequent viewer of my channel, you know how high I am on Carl Brooks. Moving over to the edge spot, I still have them keeping 6. Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, JJ Enagbare, Lucas Van Ness, Justin Hollins, and Brenton Cox Jr. I don't think there's any way you can remove Cox Jr. off this team. I think he was one of the most impressive defenders in this entire preseason, led the team in pressures with 7, had 3 last week against Seattle, and he's shown his great potential. Without the off-the-field issues, likely a 2nd or 3rd round draft selection, and he has shown that. And I think you cannot risk trying to put him on your practice squad. Another team will definitely sign him, and I know the Packers have never kept 6 edges under Brian Gutekunst, but this is the year I think they do, because it's just the potential there. The future of that edge room, might not include Preston Smith, Justin Hollins, where then you could have a good rotation of 4 guys with Gary and Enagbare, Van Ness, and Cox Jr. I think they definitely have to keep him, and it would be a mistake if they didn't. As for the inside linebacker, I've had it at this for the entire training camp: Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, and Eric Wilson. I don't have Tariq Carpenter making the roster. Hasn't really impressed me at inside linebacker. Hasn't impressed me at safety. Hasn't impressed me at special teams. I think he'll still get placed on the practice squad, but I don't have him making the 53. Eric Wilson offers way more in special teams, and honestly, as an inside linebacker, if they really needed him. Isaiah McDuffie has filled in greatly, in my opinion, in the absence of Devondre Campbell. Who knows if Devondre Campbell will be ready week 1? I think, there's a chance he couldn't be, but after that would likely be ready week 2 or 3. But I'm comfortable with Isaiah McDuffie filling in if we need to week 1. He's impressed me. So that's my inside linebacker. For cornerback, this has changed a lot for me as well, and I'm ending up keeping 4 guys here. It's a little risky, but Eric Stokes is going to open on the PUP, so you're only rolling with 4 corners for the first 4 weeks at minimum. So I think you're okay with that, especially with the emergence of Carrington Valentine, and the dude could fill in at any spot. He played some slot in the Seattle game. He's been great outside, a good coverage guy. Looks great tackling. He looks like a 7th round steal. So Jair, Rasul, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, Eric Stokes will start in the PUP, likely come back after week 4, and they would be fine in that regard. Safety, I'm keeping 6. This is why I'm okay keeping 4 corners, because I'm keeping 6 safeties. So we still have 10 defensive backs overall. Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage, Tarvarius Moore, John Owens, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Dallin Levitt. Now, I see a lot of people only keeping 1 of Owens or Moore, but I think the Packers just love the veteran duo there, and it shows because they've rotated them in and out with first team, both of those guys. And I know Tarvarius Moore is hurt, so maybe they don't end up keeping him if that injury is more significant. But last week, Matt LaFleur said it was a day-to-day knee injury. So I see them keeping both. I think Owens and Moore have been okay all of preseason. They've had their mistakes, but they've also looked okay. And that safety room is such a big question mark. I think you need to have a lot of guys in there in case something goes wrong, or you want to replace one of Ford or Savage or something of that sort. And Anthony Johnson Jr. I have making this roster due to the potential as a run support type of guy, and considering they're keeping 4 corners, Anthony Johnson Jr. could play cornerback in a pinch if there's a significant injury in a game or something of that sort. He played 3 or 4 years, I believe, cornerback at Iowa State, then converted to safety in the last season. So he has cornerback experience. Not that you want to play him there all the time, but he has that experience in a pinch. Donald Levitt, a core special team player. Don't ever want to see him on the defense, but he is a core special team player, a Rich Bisaccia guy. That's why I still have the Packers keeping him. Going over special teams, we have Anders Carlson, Daniel Whelan, and Matt Orzech. Just over an hour ago, the Packers cut Pat O'Donnell. Not too much of a shock for me. The Packers are going younger. I believe O'Donnell was the oldest player on the team, and he also cost more money than Whelan. And he would be an unrestricted free agent next year, where Whelan is tied to the team through 2024, and he's looked great all of camp and preseason. He's been booming the ball in terms of punting all offseason, and he's looked great, and he's going to be the first Irishman since 1985 to be on a 53-man roster in the NFL. So super excited for that. Anders has been inconsistent, but had a great game against Seattle. That 58-yard field goal looked great. Matt Orzech has been the long snapper starting this entire offseason. They do have Hatcher, but Matt Orzech was their offseason ad as a free agent, and I believe he just will be the long snapper. I don't think there's any question there. Then going over the IR/PUP, obviously, as I said earlier, Eric Stokes likely to start on PUP. Pretty 99% sure he's going to start there. Tyler Davis is already on IR, and Luke Tenuta will be placed on IR after the official 53-man roster. You know, they would have put him on IR by now if they weren't trying to keep him on the roster and maybe get him later in the season. So that's how I see that going down with IR/PUP. Now, finally, going over my practice squad, which consists of 16 players. Firstly, Alex Magoo. We talked about that. Manuel Wilson practice squad, and Tyler Goodson. I have 2 running backs be on this practice squad. It depends on the severity of Goodson's injury. They very well could, you know, waive him with an injury designation. We'll see exactly what happens, but I would love to see Goodson back on the practice squad. I think the Packers like him. And then we also have Bonds and Melton at wide receiver. Bonds looked great in that last game, kind of showcased his skill on being a practice squad guy. And Melton, same thing as the Goodson thing. You know, the injury severity will depend there, and if he can be brought back on the practice squad, I think the Packers like him because he offers, you know, speed type of wide receiver, special teams ability, and I think he would be a solid practice squad guy. As for the offensive line, I have Kadeem Telfort and Cole Schneider. Telfort was kind of the next man up at tackle after all the guys on the 53, and Schneider was, you know, the backup center at some points and can play some guard, and he was with the team last year, so I have both of those guys making practice squad. As for the defensive line, I have John Ford and Chris Slayton. I think those are the next 2 guys up, and with them only keeping 5, they'll probably keep 2 on the practice squad. I have Keyshawn Banks at edge. I thought he's been pretty impressive for this training camp, so he earns the practice squad spot at edge. With them keeping 6, they likely only have to keep 1, or they could even keep none on the practice squad, but if you're holding 16 players, probably should keep 1 edge. At linebacker, I have Carpenter and Phillips Jr. Carpenter, you know, he could come up in a pinch, play some special teams, be a backup type of safety role. Don't see him making the 53, but I do see him making the practice squad. And Phillips Jr. I thought has been very impressive all training camp. I just can't put him over Eric Wilson on the roster, so I have him making the practice squad. Then we have Ballantyne and Ford at cornerbacks. Ballantyne, a special teams guy, but I just couldn't put him on the 53. I think there's other spots and other players that deserve to be on the roster more than him. Ford had a really nice game last week against Seattle. He played slot cornerback, the highest graded defender. I think he deserves to be on the practice squad. As for safety, we have Ennis Gaines and Benny Sapp. I was keeping Ennis Gaines on my 53 like 5 days ago, but he had a poor game in Seattle, and I just feel like, keeping 6 safeties with Johnson Jr. and Levitt would be enough. Now, you could consider him a slot cornerback and make him your 5th cornerback, but then that would be removing someone else off the roster. I just couldn't end up doing it, so I have him getting back on the practice squad. Same with Benny Sapp, who was impressive in the Seattle game, ended that game with an interception, and has been a pretty solid safety, and I think would be good to bring back on the practice squad. So that does it for my final 53-man roster prediction for the Green Bay Packers. Cutdown day is tomorrow, so expect a video out on my instant reaction on that, and we'll compare on how many I got right, how many I got wrong. Now, obviously, for the practice squad, a lot of other players are going to be cut around the league, so the Packers could definitely bring in other players, and that will likely happen. But I'm not going to guess who those guys are. So if I'm only going off of who the Packers have on their roster now, those are my 16 guys on the practice squad. But it likely will include like 2 outside guys from cutdown day from other teams. But that about does it for this video. I appreciate you guys watching. If you could leave a like down below, it supports my channel a ton. But I'll catch you on the next one. And as always, go Pack Go.